Hi, I'm Bob Resselman, Performance Test Lead at Exelon Development. Today, I'm going to demonstrate how to configure Neoload to save response data from an HTTP request directly to disk. Having response data on hand after a load test is particularly useful when trying to determine the reason for anomalies in behavior of the application under test. The topics we're going to cover during this demonstration are how to bind an HTTP request to a virtual user, how to define variables to generate random data, how to declare the location on disk where response data will be stored. Of course, I'll show you how to run the test and then view the saved responses. So, let's get started. The first thing we need to do is to create the virtual user. Using my mouse, I go to the User Paths node in the Neoload design dialog. I right-click and select New User Path. The dialog New User Path appears. I'm going to name this virtual user simple_user. And then I click OK. I expand the tree for simple user and right-click on the Actions branch. I left-click Insert as Child and then select Request HTTP Request. The HTTP request dialog appears. I select the empty option because I'm going to manually configure the HTTP request. I click the Create button at the bottom of the dialog. In the Server dropdown, I select Local 3000. Local 3000 is a simple API web server I made that runs on my local machine. I named the web server Local 3000 previously. Local 3000 is an API that publishes one endpoint, processor. The way the endpoint works is that I pass in two query parameters. One query parameter is value. The other is user ID. Value takes a piece of arbitrary data. User ID takes a distinct user ID. The API reformats the query parameters into a JSON object that's passed back as a response. This response data is what we're going to save. For the purpose of this demonstration, we're going to assign a random GUID to the parameter value. Also, we're going to assign to the parameter user ID a GUID that represents the ID of the user. We're going to configure the test to run with two virtual users, each based on simple user. Each virtual user will have its own GUID ID. We'll see the details for creating random GUIDs and a GUID for each virtual user in a moment. Once I've declared the server to use, I need to configure the path of the API endpoint. First, I'll type in the endpoint processor. Then, I'll add the query parameter value. However, instead of hard-coding a value for the query parameter, I'm going to have Neoload generate a unique GUID each time a request is made. I click the ellipsis button on the right. This brings up the Variable Picker dialog. I click the Variable Manager button. Then I click the New Variable button. The Create Variable dialog appears. I select Random UUID. I name the UUID variable random_GUID. Then I click the option on each request. This means a new GUID will be created each time the test makes a request. I click OK. I click OK again. I select Random GUID and then click the OK button. The variable, as notated by $brackets random GUID, is now assigned to the query parameter value. Each time a request is made, a new GUID will be generated. I add the query parameter user ID and use the variable declaration process I just showed you to assign user ID a value. To add a new variable using the Variable Manager dialog, I click on the variable icon on the lower left below the list of existing variables. Again, I select Random UUID. I name the variable user underscore GUID. I select the option for each virtual user. Then I click OK. I select user underscore GUID from within the variable picker dialog. The variable user underscore GUID is assigned to query parameter user ID. Setting the server and the path automatically creates the URL for the test to call when making an HTTP request. Now I need to tell Neoload how to save each response to a file on disk. I select the Advanced button at the bottom of the Design dialog. The Advanced Parameters dialog appears. I click the checkbox Write Response to File. I paste in a string that I created earlier. The string contains the path on my machine to the folder where responses will be saved. Neoload uses the file name template to name the file that contains response data. In this case, the file name template tells Neoload to name the file response underscore brackets ID.txt, where ID is a built-in variable that increments up 1 each time a new file is created. Thus, we'll get file names such as response underscore 0.txt, response underscore 1.txt, etc. for as long as the test runs. I click OK. Now I create a population using the population wizard. I use the default settings. Next, I configure the actual test. I select the Runtime dialog. I select the option Constant Load Variation Policy, which means all virtual users will be created before testing starts. I configure the test to create 2 virtual users. I set the test to run by time for 10 seconds. I apply the test configuration. To run the test, I click the green arrow at the top of the Neoload dialog. For this demo, I skip sharing test results. The Test Run dialog appears. I click play to run the test. The test runs for 10 seconds. I copy the graphed results to the UI when the test completes. You can see there are a number of metrics recorded in the test results. For example, number of requests a second, response time, and number of virtual users generated. Also, you can see the responses have indeed been written to disk. You can see that each query parameter value was passed into the request as a unique GUID. But each virtual user's user ID is constant. One user ID ends in 9BE, while the other GUID ends in 720. Let's do a fast review before we end. I created an HTTP request that I bound to my localhost API. I configured Neoload to save the response from the HTTP request as a file in a specific folder on my local machine. I told Neoload to name the file according to the file name template I created. I created a population. I configured the test to run at a constant load. I told Neoload to create 2 virtual users for the test and to run the test for 10 seconds. Then I ran the test by clicking the run arrow at the top of the dialog. So, there you have it. Configuring Neoload to save responses from HTTP requests will help you out a lot, particularly for advanced testing scenarios. Neoload has a number of very powerful features. I hope you found this one useful.